Hello and welcome to your 100 most popular cars ever, as voted for by you, the Men and Motors viewers. If you saw our first programme, you'll have seen the first 20 cars roll across the screen, and now it's time to open the garage on the next 20. So here we go with number 80. Now, a few of you might be wondering how on earth the Vauxhall Astra made it onto this list. But like so many other cars, there's a gem hiding in amongst the mediocrity. Not so long ago, when you were after your very first hot hatch, the Astra GTE would be jostling for top spot. Refreshing the old school amongst the swoopy, curvy competition, the GTE was a proper man's hot hatch.
In the early 80s, when the GTE came out, it was thrown right in the middle of the hot hatch wars alongside the Fiesta XR2, Golf GTI, Peugeot 205.
There's nothing really that kind of attracted me to my Astra. It was basically for work purposes only and not pleasing on the eye.
Vauxhall weren't brilliant at making desirable cars, but the Astra was one of those that didn't need to be desirable to sell by the shed load. It was practical, reliable and cheap, and for most of the motoring community, most of the time, that was enough.
For me, it was always regarded as the kind of thing your Uncle Terry and his wife would buy, an Astra. It's for people who really have no consideration, thought or passion about what they're going to drive.
So sometimes you need a good kick up the backside to make you see the error of your ways. And for Vauxhall, that came in 1998 in the form of the Ford Focus. The Astra simply had to change. The new car was better to drive, but still, the only colour that suited it was beige. Oh well, 1 out of 2 ain't bad.
Any preconceptions you might have about the earlier cars being rubbish, for want of a better word, and boring, and not fantastically well put together. It looks like they've finally got their act together, because I say the new one is a fantastic car.
So thank heavens for this, an Astra that doesn't induce an instant comatose state in anybody. The all-new Astra is a massive improvement. Now, tractor manufacturers are not normally very glamorous, but then most tractor manufacturers don't come from Sant'Agata in Italy, and they don't normally make cars. Not ones like this, anyway. Lamborghini had a long and troubled past until 1991 when they launched the Diablo. That year, the company made its first profit in almost 5 years.
The 80s were all about excess. You had lots of money and lots of people wanting to spend a lot of money, so out of that came the massive supercar revolution. And I think you had the looks with Lamborghini. The Countach was a fantastic looking car before that Miura. But now it was all about speed, and the whole brief of the Diablo was to produce a car that could do over 200 miles an hour, and they did it.
Well, this one's 540 horsepower, weighs about 1.5 tonnes, so it's quite a heavy old beast. But with that amount of power, it's very, very quick. Particularly the acceleration is the most impressive thing. It does 30 to 50 in 2 seconds in third gear, so it's very, very good for overtaking. Top speed's 208 miles an hour, but that's fairly academic. I've certainly never seen that in that one. Handling is pretty good. Again, it's 4-wheel drive, but it's a very big, heavy car, a lot of engine behind you, so if you do get it wrong, you know about it awfully quickly.
The fastest and most exclusive Lamborghini ever, the GT was capable of 211 miles an hour. Only 80 were made, all left-hand drive. Only 6 made it to the UK. It also became the fastest production car ever when the McLaren F1 went out of production.
Well, I've driven the Diablo, and I don't think it does stand out from, the other cars in that class. 220, F1. You look back at the supercars as well. I think about the fastest of that bunch was the Bugatti EB110 Supersport. And I think that summed up the whole thing about Italian sports cars, because if you wanted to reverse the car, you swung open the door, which pivoted up, and then you shifted your bum out to sit on the sill. You stuck your legs down the tunnel to work the pedals, and you looked back over the roof. And that was the only way you could safely reverse the thing. Well, I mean, when something is as impractical as that, it's quite frankly a nonsense.
Now next at number 78 is a movie star. It's the Delorean DMC-12. Now the Delorean was of course the car that Michael J. Fox used to zip around in Back to the Future. But everybody knows that, so we're not going to mention it. Instead, we're going to tell you all about the less well-known story behind DeLorean.
Well, John DeLorean I know very little about. I'd like to say I was too young to remember a lot about John DeLorean. All I do remember was that the man must have been a blooming genius because he managed to talk our government out of millions of pounds to go and fund his car empire, which he was producing these wacky, wild cars in Ireland, I think it was. And I think he just spent the money out on a big yacht somewhere in the south of France, because I don't think the company was a huge success. In fact, I know it wasn't a success, and that went to the wall. So John DeLorean, I suppose, was just a professional playboy.
So DeLorean was probably the only man in the world with the technical know-how and the entrepreneurial skills to set up an entirely new car company. But still, it was a massively ambitious project. So as to achieve the profits that DeLorean had in mind, the company had to have a very economic workforce, and late 70s America wasn't the place for that. So with a lure of £47 million in sponsorship proving irresistible, DeLorean moved to Northern Ireland.
I think, irrespective of the films, I think that the car does have its own appeal. To my knowledge, it's the only car that was ever made without any paint on it. It is stainless steel, and it's unique because of that.
The car itself followed DeLorean's flair for innovation. With a plastic monocoque surrounded by a brushed aluminium body, the DeLorean achieved a lightweight and individual appearance. A Renault-sourced 2.7 V6 provided performance that meant the DMC-12 had go as well as show.
I think very disappointing in its performance. They were very heavy cars, and the performance obviously suffered a lot for that, but the bodywork was one of the biggest problems. It would mark very easily. If you leant up against it in jeans, the rivets in your jeans would scratch the paintwork, even fingerprints would stay. And somebody was once reported to have parked their car under a maple tree, and in the morning came to get in it, and it was covered in leaves, and hosed it off, but there was imprints of maple leaves all over the car.
I do know that the production of the DeLorean sports car was fraught with technical difficulties. I think there were strikes all the time. Workers weren't getting paid. The factory was continually running into masses of debt, and that's where John DeLorean went and tapped our then Prime Minister for a few quid to go and bail him out of trouble, and I think he just basically spent the money on himself.
And so from the DeLorean, a car that could go anywhere in time, to one that was well ahead of its time. At number 77 in your chart, the Citroen DS. This is the car that's been described by philosopher Roland Barthes as having fallen from the sky. It's the Citroen DS. The name DS translating to goddess from the French. This elegant deity was leagues ahead of its same-day counterparts.
Citroen DS, one of the great loves of my life. I think they're beautiful, stunning, iconic cars. They launched at the Paris show in 1955, and it was as though a spaceship had arrived on Earth. Nobody's seen anything like it before. The shape of it, hydro-pneumatic suspension, a hydraulic gearbox, hydraulic clutch, you name it. It was just so breathtaking.
This vehicle descended from the heavens to the Paris Motor Show in October 1955, and by the end of day one, it had already attracted the attention of 12,000 disciples who immediately placed an order for the DS. It became the car of the moment. It had a variety of uses, from being the official car of the French government in its role as a diplomatic service vehicle, to its employment as an ambulance on the streets of Paris. In 1966, its status as something more than a motor car was cemented when it was installed as a design classic of the 20th century in the New York Museum of Modern Art.
What attracted me to the car was its incredible shape, very futuristic, very timeless, very graceful.
Considered as elegant as the Venus de Milo, the bodywork attained a simplicity in its streamlined contours that radically contrasted other cars of the era. The DS combined its good looks with a uniqueness that endeared it to so many, with features including innovative hydro-pneumatic suspension, disc brakes and hydraulic power steering.
Citroen took the decision at the launch of the BX, really, that they would stop making cars that were idiosyncratic, cars that you had to be an enthusiast to drive and to appreciate. And they said, they'd been taken over by Peugeot, who made boring cars. And And Peugeot said, enough of this hydro pneumatics and these silly Citroen eccentricities. We will make cars that appeal to the mass. And by and large, that's what's happened since.
Some of the more avant-garde characteristics include amazing headlights that see round corners, which has recently been picked up by the new Vauxhall Astra. The DS also had the rather silly ability to be driven on 3 wheels, should the need ever arise. On now to number 76. Now, the words Volkswagen and sports car appear to be mutually exclusive. They may have made the GTI, but that was more than 30 years ago. And in recent times, they really appear to have gone off the boil a bit. But then in the 90s, they came up with this, the Corrado. Originally launched in 1990 as the G60, the Corrado was front-wheel drive with 158 brake horsepower from its G-Charger supercharged engine. It was dubbed Volkswagen's first full-blooded sports car since the Scirocco and was received as such.
Primarily because of the smoothness of the VR6. It's such a great driver's car. The performance, the torque, everything you get with it. With a 16 valve, you do have to rev it quite a lot to get the thing moving. But because the engine is quite a little bit lighter than the VR6, it does seem to handle a little bit better.
All I can tell you about the Volkswagen Corrado, to be honest with you, is that I wanted one. I could never, ever dream in a million years of getting insurance for one.
So alongside inventing one genre with the Golf GTI, VW also managed to reinvent another with the truly terrific Corrado. You know, British sports cars have a long and troubled heritage, but we have always managed to overcome these with a blend of style, individuality and raw power. No other company manages to embody this better now than the TVR. And next is the car that brought about resurgence in TVR's popularity.
The Griffin was, it was kind of a new generation TVR. I mean, it was the one that really turned the company round. You know, very, very basic, you know, big engine, brutal sound, fantastic handling, you know, spin the back wheels, real muscle car. And everything since then really has been a kind of an evolution of that.
Visually, the Griffin brought TVR kicking and screaming into the 90s. Out went the sharp, angular lines of the 80s, and in came the smoothness of the 90s.
When a TVR breaks down, a TVR owner is disappointed. Okay, they're not angry, they're normally disappointed. It's like your kid getting a D at school, or a detention, or your dog making a mess on their car. You still love them. You want them to be right, you want them to be perfect. You don't fall out of love with them because one thing goes wrong. And the people that buy TVRs, that enjoy them, are those people. They see it as a hobby. They're enthusiasts.
But despite its relatively short life, the car had brought TVR back into the limelight and set the shape for the company's future. There are a few things more seductive than a really classy two-seater sports car, especially when it's made by Porsche. So when they came up with the Boxter, they were bound to be onto a good thing. Plus, of course, it's just a great car.
For me, the Porsche Boxster is one of those cars that you hear coming first and you turn around and see it coming and you immediately know what it is. I mean, it's got those really striking looks, the real kind of supercar road car. It looks fantastic.
Originally launched at the 1996 Paris Motor Show, 3 years after Porsche teased us with a concept roadster, the car was powered by a 2.5-litre flat-six engine giving 204 brake horsepower. This was enough to power the car to 60 in around 7 seconds, but Porsche soon realised that the Boxster had such a great chassis, more power could be easily coped with.
For me, I think the Boxster's aimed at young men with lots of money that like pulling girls, but that could just be a generalisation.
Now, some have criticised the car's look, saying that in profile you can't tell whether it's going forwards or backwards, and that the car is just a little bit bland. Well, in my opinion, there's a difference between blandness and subtlety, and those that can't see it don't deserve one anyway. What a car to end this section of the programme on, the Porsche Boxster. Fantastic. Now, before we go, let's see what cars have made the chart so far today. So in 80th spot, we have the Vauxhall Astra. At 79, the beautiful Lamborghini Diablo. At 78, the anytime classic, the Delorean DMC-12. At number 77 in your chart, the Citroen DS. On now to number 76, the Corrado. And next is the TVR Griffin and the Autobahn-crunching Porsche Boxster. Well, that's it from part one, but here's a few more clues now to a car that you didn't vote for. The manufacturer used to make tractors, and the car itself is named after the only bull ever to survive the bull ring. I'll tell you in a few moments. Hello, here we go again. And what car is named after a bull? Answer, the Lamborghini Murcielago, that's what. So let's return to the chart proper now. And next up, we have a small French family car, which sounds extremely boring, except it's not. The 206 GTI is the spiritual successor to the 205 GTI, favourite hot hatch of just about every seasoned car enthusiast for the past 20 years. Due to extra safety and emissions requirements, the 206 couldn't be quite as small and agile as the 205, but how close could it come to emulating the old Gallic fire rocket?
I think the real reason why the Peugeot 206 isn't as good as the 205, well, there's two. First of all, it's too heavy, because you start to get things like everyone wants electric windows and they want air conditioning and they want this, that and the other. It all adds weight, which the original 205 was basically a lightweight, performance hot hatch.
By 2003, Peugeot had realised the 206 had to have a power boost to keep up with the hot hatch market.
The car's really easy to drive. It's only got a small engine, but it's really nippy to get around town. It's ideal for what I need it for.
So the 206 GTI may fall short a bit of being a successor to the 205's crown, but it has proved its capability in its own right. Well, next up at number 72, it's the Lotus Esprit. First unveiled as a styling exercise from the Giugiaro design studios in 1974, Lotus was flooded with so many inquiries, it decided to take the successor for the Europa into production.
I can literally trace back some of my early love for cars to that car when that was in the Spy Love Me, the Series 1, the white one. It was in the hotel, it was in the cinema foyer in Plymouth, and we went to see the Spy Love Me, and it was sat there, Series 1 Lotus Esprit, and it just looked absolutely outrageous.
The style is unmistakable, and although the technology has moved on immeasurably, the overall design of the Esprit has changed little in 30 years.
Young kids don't know what the car is, so they think it's something modern. The styling is still, could be a modern car.
Lotus wasn't finished yet, and in 1997 it launched the V8 Esprit, the quickest and most powerful road-going Lotus ever. But unfortunately, sales dwindled, and Lotus announced that after 30 years in production, the anniversary model would be the last. And with performance like that, the Esprit can still cut it with the very best in the supercar world. Well, next, it's something that 20 years ago set the rally world alight. Any car with a successful motorsport history will find a following. Amongst the all-time greats of the rally world is a car that caused a real stir at the time, could be found on the bedroom wall of any Carlos Sainz fan, but that only the informed would mention today. It is the Lancia Delta Integrale.
Lancias in the 1960s were aspirational cars. They were beautifully made and actually cost more to produce than Lancia actually earned from selling them. So by the end of the 60s, they were almost close to bankruptcy, and they were taken over by Fiat. Now, when Fiat took over, the rot set in, literally. They gained a terrible reputation for rust. They'd used very poor quality recycled steel, and the cars used to disintegrate within a couple of years.
The history of the road-going Delta Integrale is long and complicated. Based on the original Delta designed by Giorgio Giugiaro in 1979, the 1986 Delta four-wheel drive was the first nod to a performance version. In 87, the 8-valve appeared, soon followed by the 16-valve version in 89. Lancia were gathering a following, but devastatingly, their success brought about the abolition of the Group B series. Lancia, though, were ahead of the game. They had a car ready to go for the new Group A series, the Delta four-wheel drive, and in 1987, the car won its first world championship.
My experience of the Lancia Delta is really the Integrale, the rally-bred version. I remember very clearly sitting in a left-hand drive rally car, just awesome to drive, incredibly loud, very powerful four-wheel drive car.
The Lancia Delta went on to win an amazing 6 world titles and was driven by some of the greatest names in rallying history. Juha Kankkunen, Carlos Sainz and Didier Auriol all piloted the famous Martini colours Integrale.
The car's actually fantastic to drive. This is probably one of its best points. Handling is just awesome. You feel a part of the car when you're going around corners and on twisty roads, and you feel involved, whereas more modern machinery, the car tends to drive yourself, whereas you have to drive this car. That's what gives you the passion is it feels really, really good to drive.
The history of the Delta is almost folklore amongst rally fans and car enthusiasts alike, checkered as it is with tragedy and triumph. It deserves its place at number 71. From a car that kick-started a revolution in the rallying world to one that by and large has been overlooked in the hugely competitive environment of the supercar. Honda's first car was a sports car, but this sports car is like no other. Developed with the help of the late Ayrton Senna, forget your temperamental Italians, this is a genuine supercar that all drivers can enjoy. In at number 71 is the Honda NSX.
Honda produced a car called the NSX, and that was in conjunction with the legendary racing driver Ayrton Senna, one of my boyhood heroes, and a guy, if anyone was going to be behind the development of a car, you'd want it to be him.
But despite its lack of heritage, Honda has a long history of motorcycle technical brilliance and a proven pedigree in Grand Prix racing.
An NSX is not going to sort of snap knicker elastic at 50 yards, with the greatest respect. But it has a kind of, it sounds a bit naff, but a quiet confidence about it. It's not a bad looking car. And when you actually get inside the thing, you start to appreciate the way it's designed. I mean, you've got loads of room, you know, you've got shoulder room, the driving position is great, visibility from out the front anyway is good. The pedals in the right position, the gearbox falls to hand. You know, so it was a car that looks the way it does because dynamically they wanted it to do a certain job.
The 3.2 V6 is a typical Honda VTEC unit that thrives on revs and goes from 0 to 62 in just 7.5 seconds.
If you was to take it to its full potential on the road, it is quite scary. The miles an hour creep up on you very, very fast.
However, may I say, Honda, Mr. Honda, if you're listening, as much as you can draw a car on the outside and get the engine dead right, you get the interiors dead wrong. Don't know what it is with Japanese cars. They tend to have swathes of black plastic and material sitting in warehouses. They must own the EU butter mountain of black cloth and plastic.
The NSX hasn't been the most successful of Hondas, but to take on the might of the European manufacturers and prove that you don't need an Italian stallion plastered on the bonnet and to spend more than £80,000 to get your speed fix, the NSX is just the ticket. Next in your list is the Datsun 240Z. More commonly known as the Z car, this was the first Japanese sports car to really make an impact.
Datsun 240Z arrives, stylish, smooth, big 3-litre engine, lots of power, 2.6-litre engine, lots of power, total reliability. Unlike the British cars, the Americans loved them, killed us overnight.
Launched in 1969, it became an immediate sensation due to the fact that it offered competent engineering, great styling and performance, and a low price.
Datsun arrived and created a car specifically for the American market, looking at some of the attributes of the European sports cars. So they created this long-bonneted, two-seater coupe with a 6-cylinder inline engine, 151 horsepower. It was quick, its handling was excellent. It got a very sophisticated rear suspension at the time when American cars and European cars didn't even have independent rear suspension. And it was the best-selling car of the 70s.
It became a highly competitive racer, and at 4,000 being sold a month, its success was guaranteed.
One thing that stands out is that it's so much more of a sort of visceral experience than you would get with a modern car. You know, modern cars, I think, tend to insulate you from the sort of driving experience, even would say modern, you know, a lot of modern sports cars.
Today, the legend that is the Z car has a worthy successor in the new 350Z. If that's as successful as the 240Z, then Nissan will have another sports car legend. Well, we seem to have stumbled across a whole range of Japanese performance cars. So lo and behold, what's this if it's not the Honda CRX? The mid-80s were indeed a boom time for Japanese sports cars. Vehicles like the Toyota Celica and earlier the Datsun 240Z were gaining a reputation for being able to challenge more established manufacturers in terms of performance, but undercut them in terms of price. Our next car did nothing to damage that reputation.
I never got to drive a CRX. I spent my early driving years wanting one, seeing them, thinking this is where it's at right now. I want one of them. Anyone that's cool and young, that's got a sporty hatchback, that's the car to have, but I never ever got to drive one.
The Honda CRX rode on the crest of the pocket rocket wave of the mid-1980s.
What was good about that car was its reliability, an unbreakable engine. And as any 18 to 20-year-old back then would know, if you bought yourself a full Fiesta XR2 or a full Escort or something like that, after 100 miles you were stuck on the side of the road trying to repair the thing. With a little CRX you could rev the nuts out that little car and nothing would ever go wrong with it.
The thing that attracts me to CRX is a whole host of things. There's the performance, the styling, the handling, just the overall package. They're really incredible cars.
Performance was impressive, if not groundbreaking. 0 to 60 would come up in around 7.5 seconds, going on to 122 miles an hour.
It usually gets a lot of attention at shows, mainly due to the condition it's in and also because it's still totally standard, which is quite rare nowadays because a lot of them have been modified.
Japanese cars, I guess, are popular to modifiers because it's literally is easy to do. They lend themselves to being max powered.
So there you are, a car that was perfectly good to start off with and made even better with the aid of MDF and nitrous oxide. In 2000, Lexus unveiled its answer to the Mercedes SL convertible. This was the SC430, and one of its big selling points was it could reach 60 miles an hour in 5.9 seconds, in which time, of course, you could have hurtled past at least half a dozen SLs.
I don't think the SC430 even deserves to be spoken about in the same sentence as an SL. The SC430 is ugly, it's overweight, it's impractical, it's overpriced, it's got huge tyre noise, it's got huge wind buffeting, it's got one engine, it's got no V12s, it's not got superchargers, and the styling, I mean, you can forgive it everything if it looked beautiful.
The thing that actually sold me on this car was I kind of was just going past the showroom and thought, yeah, they do have a sports model, I'll have a look at it. And when I went into the showroom and actually saw it for the first time, I just thought, wow, what a car.
The exterior design of the SC430 was crafted by Lexus's European Design Centre, where the team spent time in the French Riviera studying truly luxurious lifestyles.
The story goes that the design team for the SC430 went to the south of France for inspiration and you know, obviously spent too much time sat by the harbour in Nice looking at the boats, went back, built a car, made it handle like one.
The major problem with the SC430 was timing. Although it was ahead of the previous SL in terms of technology and styling, Mercedes played their trump card when they launched the new SL. It was just simply better in so many areas.
Well, Lexus is a brand new company and it's trying to chuck itself into a marketplace that's already established. So unfortunately, it doesn't have the motor sport or motor pedigree behind it that it can bring forward. And in that sense, the people that tend to drive them and buy them are dull people.
So the Lexus SC430, a good car, but let down by an image problem. And that's nearly it. Let's have a look back at the cars you deemed worthy to be part of this particular section of the chart. At 73, the Peugeot 206. At 72, the Lotus Esprit. In at 71, the Lancia Delta. Sitting at number 70, the Honda NSX. At 69, the Datsun 240Z. Pulling in at number 68, the Honda CRX. And the last car in this section is the Lexus SC430. But that's the end of part 2, but in the break, have a think about this car that you didn't vote for. It's Italian, and it's got 8 legs, and it's not the Ferrari Octopus. So what is it? Hello, welcome back, and the answer to that really difficult question before the break was the Alfa Romeo Beetle Spider. Right, now on with the last 6 cars to find their way into this portion of the chart, and at number 66, it's the Ford Fiesta. Even the most humdrum of cars has an interesting story. That's not to call the Fiesta humdrum, but it's not exactly rare or exotic, is it? By the end of the 60s, Ford realised it was missing out on a massive market by not producing what was known as a Class B car. VW had the Polo, Renault the 5, and Fiat were making the 127. By 1969, Ford of Europe managed to convince their American bosses that the market for small cars was growing. It was profitable and easier to enter than originally thought.
It's a hatchback, front-wheel drive, clean lines, light, good road holding, pretty good performance, nice packaging, and it's a Ford.
By 1972, the first results were presented. Ford had taken massive inspiration from Fiat's 127 and had developed a plan around that. Market analysis wanted to determine how much the Fiesta would overlap the appeal of the Escort.
The appeal of the Fiesta to buyers and to people like that is quite broad, really. I think the Fiesta in general appeals to pretty much anybody. You know, you get first-time drivers buying them because they're reasonably cheap, you know, and they're reliable and all those sort of things. And then some of the sort of slightly more performance-orientated models, the Zetec S, appeal to people like myself who wanted something reasonably quick but couldn't afford, you know, a proper hot hatch and all the insurance that goes with it.
May 1984 saw the XR2 reappear, this time in facelifted form and with a 1600 CVH engine. It was this model that added some desirability to the Fiesta range, riding on the success of cars like the Golf GTI and the Peugeot 205 GTI.
We bought one of the first XR2s, and for a Ford, that was well styled. It had very good graphics on the side. It had big alloy wheels and looked the business with the 1600 Kent engine in it. It went extremely quickly too. So that was a real sort of boy racer version of the Fiesta, and I loved it.
Over time, the spirit of the Fiesta has been lost. It has kept pace with a more demanding market, and now it's amongst the safest in its class. The Mark V looks very different to any Fiesta that's gone before it, and hopefully, with the introduction of the ST150 model, the Fiesta will reclaim its crown in the hot hatch market. Well, from the ever-popular Ford Fiesta, we move on to a vehicle now that's the envy of everybody on the road, and that's not just Fiesta drivers. It's the Ferrari 250 GTO. Before the GTO arrived, the 250 GT short wheelbase was racing in the Grand Touring class. It was an attractive enough car, but an aerodynamic brick.
Well, the features that I particularly like about this car, it's first of all its design, its looks. You know, I believe this is one of the most beautiful cars that Ferrari ever made. From any angle, it looks great. It's also, you know, what I also do like about it is that it's, in my opinion, the last, you know, GT car that you can drive on the road, leave from home, go to the track, do a race and drive back home.
I have driven one. It's quite an it's not a car you jump into and drive down to the shops. Ideally, you want to spend about certainly 5 to 10 minutes warming it up before you set off. And then for the first 20 miles, you can't really change gear that fast until the gearbox oil warms up. So again, it's a Ferrari. It's built for Italy in the summer.
The 250 GTO was named for the fact that it was homologated, which simply means it was approved for racing. And GTO means Gran Turismo Omologato. Try saying that after a few.
Ferrari 250 GTO, yeah, why not buy one if you've got 6 million quid? That'd be a good idea. Nick Mason's got one, and I interviewed him one day at Silverstone, and it was going off in a race with another guy driving it. And I said, Nick, you know, this car's worth £6 million and you're racing it. And he said, well, that's what it was designed for, to be raced. And I said, and you let other people drive it? He said, yes, not anybody, don't bother to write in. Which I thought was a nice line.
No such thing as the perfect car. No car can do absolutely everything. It can either carry the luggage or it can win the race or whatever. But the GTO comes closest that I've ever encountered to the great all-rounder. It looks fantastic. It's an enormous pleasure to drive. It makes a bad driver good and a good driver brilliant. It's got good brakes. It can be used to win. I mean, it finished third at Le Mans, my particular car, but it can also take kids to school. You can carry some luggage in it, and if you need to, you can sell it and buy a house in the south of France and a yacht and a couple of other things.
With 250 GTOs selling now for a couple of £1 million, its appeal has never wavered, and its passionate Ferrari roots remain intact. It's proved to be one of the most enduring street cars of all time, as its price at auction will always attest. And I'm sure everybody watching this would agree that the 250 GTO is a very special car indeed. Right, moving on to another vehicle that actually holds a unique record in the motoring history books, but it's not a family saloon, it's not an MPV, and it's not a hot hatch. So what is it? The TVR Chimera is the best-selling TVR ever, having sold 10,000 units since its introduction in 1993. OK, that's not a massive figure over the course of a decade. In fact, it's about as many as most mass-produced car makers will sell on a Wednesday morning. But don't forget, these are nailed together by hand in Blackpool, a place where tea breaks arrive and work stops if it's raining, which it does. A lot.
I think if they'd have gone from the 400 and the 450 wedge shape straight to the Chimera, it would have taken a lot longer for that car to pick up.
In a world where most cars are judged on the number of gadgets the driver has to play with, TVR remained resolutely simple. The only toy you got was a pedal underneath your right foot, but boy did it provide plenty of entertainment. Horizon-chasing performance was provided by the 4.5-litre V8 developing 285 brake horsepower.
It's actually really confusing sometimes to comment about a TVR because spiritually they've all got the same basic key elements. They're light, they're noisy, they're incredibly fast, they're put together, and they're enthusiast cars.
At number 63 we have the all-American Dodge Viper. From its concept beginnings to its recent reimagining, the Dodge Viper has been the first port of call for any power and performance-crazed motorists eager to leave an aerodynamic outline in the minds of amazed onlookers.
Most people's reaction to the Viper is quite excited. It is very rare in the UK. We've had 6, I don't think there are any other. Probably of the previous model, there are only 25 in the UK.
In 1989, the Detroit Motor Show played host to a stunning array of new concepts and dazzling performance-orientated vehicles, with the highlight being a new concept from Dodge in the form of the Viper. The Viper's first few years in production provided the designers with many new ideas and innovations to revise and improve the original. And so in 1996, the Viper GTS was made available.
The Dodge Viper was one of those cars that everyone had on the bedroom wall, and I was never quite convinced why. When I was growing up, in the, well, I've never grown up, when I was alive in the 90s, I could never see what it had going for it.
As a modern-day muscle car, the Viper demands an awful lot from its driver. Definitely not for the faint-hearted, its awesome power provides a staggering 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, a brake horsepower of 378, and a lightweight frame, which could be more than enough to overwhelm a less experienced driver.
Viper to drive is absolutely fabulous. It has terrific performance. You're looking 0 to 60 under 4 seconds, potentially 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, I think for a car to be in the top 100 cars ever, it's got to be innovative, it's got to be stylish, or it's got to have great performance, or great handling, great styling, or it's got to be revolutionary. The Morris Minor I would have in the top 100 over a Dodge Viper. You put a 7-litre V12 engine, or whatever it was, in a truck, and it's going to go like stink, It's just, it's big, bold, brashy, and very American.
An unconventional modern-day triumph, the Viper is loved by its fans the world over for its trademark image, which pays homage to so many of the greats. Its raw power and force on the road give the Viper its rightful place in the top 100. Toyota originally explained the name MR2 as meaning mid-engined, runabout, two-seater. But once the marketing men got hold of it, it became mid-engine, rear-drive two-seater, the rear drive being felt to be more desirable to the sports car drivers that the MR2 was aimed at.
When the MR2 was introduced, it was really a budget two-seater sports car. I mean, a kind of rival to Lotus Elise, if you like. I mean, even today, it offers great budget motoring for someone that wants a two-seater sports car and isn't too concerned about where they're going to put the luggage.
A lot of the owners are 30s, 40s, 50-year-olds, but now there's a lot of people coming in, a lot of youngsters coming in now. A lot of late teens, early 20s are starting to realise that these cars are cheap to buy still at the moment, so their prices are starting to rise.
2 versions were available, both using 1.6-litre 16-valve engines, one with 112 brake horsepower, the other supercharged, developing 145 brake horsepower.
I thought the MRT is absolutely fantastic to drive. And I was quite lucky the day I took one out because it was sunny and I could have the roof down, so I couldn't actually vouch for the wind resistance or noise when the roof's up, but in terms of having an open road in front of you on a Sunday afternoon, there's no more fun for that sort of money.
Toyota went back to basics with the Mark III MR2, a 1.8 normally aspirated engine producing just 138 brake horsepower. And once again it seems you just love those Japanese sports cars. Now we have one more car to go today, but before that, let's have a look back. In 66th place, you voted for the Ford Fiesta. At 65, the legendary Ferrari 250 GTO. In at 64, the TVR Chimera. At number 63, we have the all-American Dodge Viper. And at 62, the Toyota MR2. Now, for those of you who are cursing us for not having the Sprite or the Midget in our list, here's a little bit of consolation for you. It's the modern-day reincarnation of those cars. In at number 61, it's the Smart Roadster. With cars, more tends to mean more. More horsepower means more speed. More space means more comfort. More money means more toys. But fun tends to get overlooked in favour of economy and style. So enter the Smart Roadster.
Smart's really started to fill a gap in the market when they're offering cars like nobody else does. And for example, when the 4.2 launched a couple of years ago, there's nothing else in the market like it. It's really innovative thinking. The actual Smart Roadster is a bit of an odd-looking thing, and I think it could be seen as a frog-eye Sprite for the next generation. It's a very small, compact sports car.
The thing that appeals to me about the smart cars is initially their styling and their bright colours, but also the technology that goes into them, and they're good for the environment, 98% recyclable.
And unlike so many other cars, the Smart is able to deliver on its promise with a drive that's both fun but safe. Its tiny 700cc engine produces just 80 brake horsepower, but it does have a turbo which provides almost no extra performance but makes a nice whistling noise when you change gear.
One of my favourite all-time cars is the MX-5, and it's all about having fun at low speed, so you can throw it around a corner where you might be able to throw a saloon car around slightly faster, but it wouldn't have the same effect. It's to do with, the steering, the handling, the balance of a car, and that's where the Smart Roadster is at its best. It's perfectly balanced, and the power is adequate, no more, and you'll hang on to your licence.
The Smart Roadster really isn't slower than the average MPV, and as for being made of plastic, well, the engine in the Smart is a Mercedes-built 3-cylinder turbocharged engine. It produces 80 brake horsepower, and horsepower for tonnes, that's quite a lot better than you'll find in average cars. It really is quite quick.
So there we have it, the Smart Roadster, genuine driver involvement for the price of some nice wheels on other cars. And that's why it's at number 61. Well, that's almost it from today. Do make sure you're with us next time though. But for the moment, here's a recap on the 20 cars we've shown you today. So 40 down and 60 to go. If your favourite's been and gone already, then stick with us to the end whatever. And if we haven't seen it yet, then who knows where it may be in the list. See you next time. Bye-bye.